Our guest on Veterans Chronicles is retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy. He is a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, totaling 136 combat missions between the three wars. He is also a member of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. And Colonel Hardy, a great honor to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Where were you born and raised?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And did you have any history of military service in your family?
Not really. Maybe I had some uncles who were in the service, World War I.
Right.
But World War II got a lot of people who didn't think about the military.
Sure. Did you have interest in flying as a kid?
No, I didn't decide to fly till the end of 42, beginning of 43.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and how did you react to that?
I was a college senior, and I was upstairs doing my homework. But I had the Eagles game on low, so my mother wouldn't hear it. And on that game, that's when they announced that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. It happened at that time in the afternoon, say, East Coast time.
Right.
And I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. But say the Japanese attacked the naval base at Pearl Harbor. Listening to the Eagles game. So shows how long a fan I've been of the Eagles.
Absolutely right. Well, you're in a good mood now. I mean, they're not having a great start to the season, but they are world champions.
Yeah.
So that's good for them. So what did you do then?
Well, I graduated from high school. I was born in 1925. I graduated from high school in June of 42. But I was just turned 17 that same month. So I had to wait a year to go into the service. But in March of 43, the Army said if you're a high school graduate, if you're 17 and a high school graduate, you can take the exam, which I did for Tuskegee. And I passed it and sworn into the service as a private and sent home until I turned 18.
And what happened once you turned 18?
Well, 18, I got orders to report the 13th of July, 1943. Went to Keesterfield, Mississippi for basic training. And from there to Tuskegee for a college training detachment, supposedly for 5 months, but it ended up 3 months. And December 43, I started in aviation cadet training and graduated Tuskegee September 44.
And what was the training like? Since you hadn't flown before, was it a big learning curve?
Well, it was a learning curve because I hadn't even driven an automobile.
Really?
So, that's right. So, but I picked it up easily, and I shouldn't say easily. I had tough times, but I picked it up and graduated as a second lieutenant in September 44. Then we'd only flown training planes until then. It was then I started flying P-40 for 10 hours and then the P-47 for combat training at Waldoboro, South Carolina, and then overseas in February 45.
What was the attitude at Tuskegee, given that the military was still segregated at that time, but there was this opportunity to serve and prove
Well, that's
themselves?
what we thought of as an opportunity, and we took it. So I will say I thought I had some good instructors. Our instructors were, except in college, in primary flying, we had black instructors of Tuskegee Institute. That part of training was contracted out by the military. But then in basic and advanced, we had white Army instructors, and I thought my instructors were pretty good.
So when did you end up deploying?
Well, in February of 45, I went overseas and flew the last few months of the war. I got 21 combat missions. I was still 19 years old then, flying a P-51, had my Rolls Royce at that time.
Finally had the P-51s, yes, absolutely. Why did you love that one so much better?
Well, it's such an easy airplane to fly, and just a smooth airplane also. And one thing is we did a good job because until the P-51 arrived over there, the fighters couldn't go all the way to the target with the bombers. But the 51 had the range that it could all the way to the target and bring them back. Because earlier when the fighters had to leave the bombers, then the German airplanes could attack them when they didn't have a fighter. With the 51s, you stayed with them to the target and back.
So what was the first combat engagement like? Training's one thing, combat.
Well, by the time I got over there weren't that many German airplanes left. The only airplanes I saw in the air were 262s, the jets. And we a couple of times we turned into them, but they left us. They were much faster than we were. Now, although on the Berlin mission, our guys shot down 3 of those things because they were more maneuverable. They come at you, but you get on their tail and good shot. We shot 3 of them down on the Berlin mission.
You mentioned Berlin. What were some of the other places you escorted the bombers?
Well, I escorted bombers mainly to southern Germany. We were stationed in Italy, on the east coast of Italy, where that little spur comes out. We were just next to that.
Okay.
And we'd take out over the Adriatic and meet the bombers somewhere up outside before they got to Germany and escort them to Germany and bring them back. But the only time I fired my guns was on strafing missions. If you had enough fuel, when you got back and let the bombers go, you'd go back over Germany looking for targets of opportunity. We wanted to deny them moving stuff around during the daytime, looking for trains or trucks or barges on the river. So,
do you remember where you did that strafing?
Oh, no, I don't remember. It all merges into one. I remember the first time I realized that stuff I noticed was them shooting back. So,
okay.
That's an eye-opener.
I would imagine so. What did you do?
Well, you just kept on and pulled away, just instant prayer, and got out. I was only hit once, but just minor.
What was your reaction when you found out the war was over in Europe?
Well, we were glad, because, I graduated in September 44, and one of our classmates was killed at Waldoboro in training. Then we got overseas, and 3 of my classmates were lost on missions, and a couple killed in accidents. So the mortality rate, you're glad the war's over. And because all those guys, 18, 19, 20 years old, are dying. It's not a good thing.
What was it like for you returning home, though?
That's the thing. Overseas, we were segregated over there. We were on a separate base. But coming back at the States, then we realized that segregation is really full force back here. And I went to Tuskegee and stayed there till it closed in 46. And I got out and went to Lockburn, where the 332nd was, and got out in November, released because I wanted to go to school. So I got out and went to NYU for a year, 47 to 48. And then went back into the service in 1948, June 48.
So 48, 49 is also when President Truman announced and then implemented.
Well, I signed to go back to the segregated base at Lockburn in January of 48. Then the Air Force announced Air Force was created in September 47. What had been the Army Air Forces was now moved to and became the United States Air Force. 7 months later, the Air Force announced they were going to integrate. And that shook some of us up because they didn't say when, and all I could envision myself is reporting to a base with all white people on it. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't know any of them because you didn't meet them when in the segregated service, say. Yeah. But when I went back in, that's when I decided I'm a pilot, but I need something else. I'll go into maintenance. And when I went back in June, I applied for electronics maintenance, radar. I wanted to fly one of those air defense airplanes. We were building fighters with radar who would be on the coast, whatnot. If enemy airplanes came in, we could launch those planes and using radar to track down the enemy airplanes. And that's what I wanted to do. And I figured I'd go in maintenance. No matter whether I was flying or not, I'd be around airplanes.
But you did end up flying quite a bit more, obviously. So where were you when the Korean War broke out?
Well, President Truman signed an executive order in July of 48, 9981. And he told the Army, Navy, and Air Force to submit their plans for racial segregation. Well, that caused quite a stir across the country. A lot of people may not remember that. The South was rigidly Democratic, and they had their racial laws into effect. And so when he signed that executive order, millions of whites in the South left the Democratic Party and became part of the States' Rights Party, with Strom Thurmond as their candidate. Mm-hmm. Strom Thurmond won a couple of states in the South, but Truman won the election, which meant that his executive order remained in effect. And so in 49, Army, Navy, and Air Force submitted their plans for racial integration. And the Air Force's plan was approved in May of 49. By the end of June, they deactivated the all-black group at Lockburn. And within a matter of weeks, everyone there had orders transferring them to Air Force bases all around the world. So they had almost instant integration.
And where did you go?
Well, I was in school at the time. I went to school, electronics school at Keisterfield for 50 weeks, starting in September 48. Graduated in August 49. Instead of getting the fighters I wanted to go to, I ended up in a B-29 outfit on the island of Guam. 19 Bomb Group as a maintenance officer in the 28th Bomb Squadron. But as a pilot, I also checked out in the B-29. In the spring of '50, they put me on a flight crew as a co-pilot on a flight crew. And that's how I got my 29 time over Korea. But that's when I first ran into the real racial problem I had. In May of '50, I got a new squadron commander. And I soon found out he didn't agree with integration. He wouldn't even speak to me except in the line of duty. And then the Korean War started, and we moved to Okinawa. Our crew flew our first mission over Korea on June 30th, 1950, right after the war started. But on the 12th of July, on a 7th mission, I was a co-pilot. When you get to an airplane, you have things to do before you start engine. I was doing my duties in the co-pilot seat, make sure I switched everything, and I heard this voice say, "Hardy, get down out of the airplane." It was my squadron commander. He replaced me on that flight, and he didn't want me flying. Well, that was the first B-29 shot down over Korea, up over North Korea, and my crew had to bail out, and I wasn't with them. And the first two people that bailed out were captured by the North Koreans and died in prison camp, but the rest of them got back. About a week later, 2 weeks, that squadron commander was moved up to group as deputy group commander, and a new squadron commander put me back on flying again. So I got to fly 45 missions in B-29s over Korea.
Did you ever find out why you were pulled from that flight?
Well, he just didn't go for racial integration. But that's not the end of that story. I came back from overseas and into SAC, and I got more training in SAC as an armored electronics maintenance officer in maintenance. And I served at Walker Air Force Base at New Mexico, then Carswell, then up at Limestone, Maine, B-36 outfit. That's the biggest bomber we ever had. But up there I applied to go to Institute of Technology at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and was accepted. And went there in 1955 and graduated in '57 with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. Then I went to Japan for a great tour. In Japan as maintenance supervisor, armored electronics. Then to Plattsburgh, New York, was a maintenance squadron commander. And my wing commander was that same officer who wouldn't speak to me on Okinawa, on Guam and Okinawa. I was up with him for almost 3 years. And it was the best 3 years for my career under him the second time.
So he changed?
He felt I was the last effectiveness report he had, the best of my 6 squadron commanders. He had changed completely, and I loved working for him the second time.
Wow.
Colonel Fred W. Miller.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing. And but I was very fortunate. The Air Force did a lot for me. I went in as a high school graduate, basically. But up there at Plattsburgh, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis ended, I got a letter from the Institute of Technology at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I graduated from there in '57 and got BS in Electrical Engineering. They notified me that we have a new graduate level course which has just been approved in reliability engineering. And we don't have enough. We want to start it right away, right after '63. We don't have enough time to advertise, so we went to prior graduates, people we thought might want to go. And your name came up. And they asked me if I wanted to go back to school, so I did for February '63 to August of '64 and got a master's degree in systems engineering - reliability. And so that changed my whole career after that. Of course, I went into procurement and whatnot up at Hanscom Air Force Base. And up there for 5.5 years. And just delighted up there. And I had a program overseas Audubon program. Automatic Voice Network, program manager and chief of engineering. For 3.5 years, we cut over the first switches in Europe, 4 in Europe, 1 in Panama, in June of 1969. But then, the Air Force created a new gunship, old C-119. It was a troop carrier airplane, but it was obsolete, but it made a gunship out of it. And then they looked for pilots who had time in it. I had a lot of pilots, so I ended up going back to training in the 119, trained as a crew member on that aircraft command, and went to Vietnam in 1970. And I was lieutenant colonel then. So when I got to Vietnam, they took my crew away from me. Our base was at Phan Rang in the southern part of Vietnam. But the airplanes were at 2 forward operating locations. one at Udon, Thailand, and one at Da Nang. I became the commander at Udon for about 3 months, then moved to the commander at Da Nang. And most of my aircraft commanders flew about at least 150 missions. But I only flew 70. I flew 70, which was enough, I guess. We'd fly at night looking for trucks, picking up infrared to pick up trucks coming down from Vietnam.
Okay.
And so I spent a year over there and came back in 1971 and retired that year.
So just looking at the swath of your career, and when you look at the plane you start with and the one you finished with, what comes to mind about the advancement over those years?
It's technique in all of them, say. Yeah. And I love flying once you got with the crew. You get on a crew and you love being with the crew. And then even in 119, I was the aircraft commander when I would fly. And we had 11 people on the crew. But the guns were fixed. And the pilot flying the airplane, myself, the gun sight was right here. And you had to fly around the target and aim the airplane. And so as the pilot flying would look in there, the forward-looking infrared would pick up, they'd put a crosshair in also. Once you got them superimposed, the pilot fires the gun, see, 1 or 2 second bursts, and 20 millimeter Gatling guns, 6 barrels, 100 rounds a second, and effective against trucks. Because all the shells coming out of that, we're flying at altitude, should be in the area of this room when they hit the ground, say, concentrated, and it was a very effective gunship.
What was your favorite of all P-51s?
51, naturally. Rolls Royce.
Was it a big transition going from P-51 to B-29?
Yes, quite a transition.
What was the biggest
P-51, you have a single engine, say, single seat in the airplane, you're by yourself. But the B-29, you had 4 engines, and a lot more could go wrong. So you had to work carefully with the co-pilot and the engineer when things went wrong to take care of them and get them under control, get the airplane under control.
Did you have fighter escorts in Korea?
We really didn't. You see, the North Koreans didn't have that much in the way of fighters, so we would fly single missions. We flew some formation missions. My last mission was trying to knock out a bridge from Manchuria to Korea. The Chinese had come across, and we're trying to stop them from bringing supplies across. But we can only go 3 ship. Normally, a whole squadron knock out the whole bridge. But we can only go 3 ship because none of the bombs are supposed to go over the middle of the bridge. And the Chinese are half of the bridge, say. So we had to just bomb the southeastern portion of the bridge, say. And but that was my last mission because I had fractured my elbow before we took off. And that was quite a bit of pain. I had to, after we left it was an 11-hour mission. And after we left the mission, I had to get a shot of morphine because the pain was so bad in the elbow.
How'd you break it?
Well, getting out of the vehicle at the airplane after briefing, that vehicle jerked and my foot caught, and I fell and caught myself on that arm. I rolled over, but I didn't feel anything at that time. It was after we got in the air that it started hurting. I was numb, I guess, for a while. So I didn't get a Purple Heart for that because it didn't happen on the mission. It happened before it took off.
Gotcha. We talked about the evolution of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the evolution of the military in general. Obviously, we talked about the integration in the late 40s. By the time you retire in the early 1970s, what's the reality?
Well, the reality was in World War II, they would never have a person of Afro-American descent over a Caucasian. And then at the end of the war, I was the commander of the detachment up at Udon and at Da Nang. And all of my pilots were Caucasian, see. And so I saw that change during the service, which is great, you know.
The story you told earlier of your own superior officer changing, did the pilots who served under you have any issues as far as you know?
Oh, no. I've been to a number of reunions with them, and I got along very well with them. But, you know, I had a funny experience at a reunion down in Florida one year. I'm looking around I was 20 years older than most of the pilots. See, I was in my 40s in Vietnam. They were in their 20s. And I'm looking around and saying, these guys are looking old. You know, it's 40 years after the war, you know. Yeah. And they were 20s then. If they're going to be bald, they're bald now, see, at the reunion, you know. And I'm looking around and saying, these guys are looking old, you know. And I was 80 years old at that time. But I always got along very well with them.
So you're still in touch with some of them?
Oh, yeah, I'm still in touch with them. In fact, I just got a call last week from a fellow, the 29 group. I didn't go to their reunion this year and want to know what happened, where I was. So they keep in touch with me.
You're in touch with all three?
The three.
As a couple of your Tuskegee brothers have said, that not only was Tuskegee critical in the integration of the military, but it was kind of an important hinge point in the civil rights movement as well. So when you think about the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen and your role within the Airmen, how do you process that?
Well, the thing is that it was our role because the Army and the Navy was still rigidly segregated. It's when the Air Force broke off, became a new service in 47. A lot of the Air Force officers, as the Air Force moved from the Army, they moved up somewhat. And a number of them had known about the group in the Mediterranean, had been by there. And shortly after they formed, the head of personnel, General Edwards, started a study. He didn't make a lot of noise about it, about racial integration. He did start a study, I guess, a couple months after the Air Force formed, just to find out, just test the waters, about racial integration. And then in April, 7 months after they formed, they announced they were going to do it. So the fact that we moved out from under the Army and the Navy, Army, the people who moved up now felt better about racial integration. So that was a good move as far as racial integration was concerned, as far as we're concerned.
How would you describe the leadership of Colonel and then General Benjamin Davis?
It was great. A lot of people felt he was tough, but he had to be. And that's the reason he made sure that we stuck with the bombers and whatnot. You leave the bombers, you're going to be court-martialed, When he was interviewed to move to the 15th Air Force, the thing that was happening, they were losing so many bombers. The head of 15th Air Force impressed upon them, we've got to cut down these losses. Colonel Davis took that as his goal. And so he stressed stay with the bombers. Because quite often some of the other groups, German fighters would come in and they would fly after them, chase them away, and if the German fighter kept going, they would follow it until they shot it down. But now they may not have as many fighters to protect them when some other Germans hit them, and they lost a lot of bombers like that, So Colonel Davis said, don't go chasing people, you stay with the bombers. You bring 10 men on that bomber, and they'll get back home again.
You do such a good job of telling your story, and that's a pattern I see with the Tuskegee Airmen because they tell it frequently. They go to local groups, they go to schools. I think kids especially are a place where you all seem to really feel like it's important to make sure people know your story. So talk about that. Not only are you the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, but you're now ambassadors for that history.
Well, that's it. We have another group, the Red Tail Group, part of the Commemorative Air Force. And they have a trailer and an airplane that fly around that go to air shows around the country. And the trailer opens up into a theater. They hold 50 kids or 40 adults. One side are just 3 screens, and the other side are the seats, whatnot. And it's a 30-minute program about the Tuskegee Airmen. And then they have a P-51 that flies with them when they're at the airport,
Okay.
And I go around with them quite a bit. I was with them in Punta Gorda just last week. They were down there, and whenever school kids come, they'll go in, school bus drive up. After the show, then the people who run it, if I'm available or Tuskegee Airmen, they will talk to the kids also to answer their questions and and when I talk to them, I also talk to the girls. I encourage the girls too, because girls make good pilots. We have some damn good pilots, and the military fighter pilots now. So it's not just the boys, because it doesn't take strength to fly an airplane. It takes technique, And so I encourage the girls too, because I know a number of women fighter pilots. So.
What are some of the reactions from people who hear your story that stick with you most?
Most people don't know about it, and that's what surprises them, And but then again, I find that a lot of kids don't know much about history. I gave a talk at a military academy in middle school in Sarasota, and I tried something different. I started high school in September 1939, the same month that Hitler invaded Poland to start the war. And when I talked to these kids, I talked about the events that were taking place, and then bring out where I was at that time. But I gave them this whole thing of events about 1940, France fell, and then Germany and Britain, the Battle of Britain, whatnot, and what I was doing. When they finished, one of the teachers said they learn more history today than they get in school, which is not good, you know.
Last question for you, Mr. Hardy, is, and I mentioned this to one of the others as well, obviously the Tuskegee Airmen were hoping for respect. You got the respect, and now the group is revered. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means a lot, and it means so much because so many fellows paid a price for that. So many of my, I'm the last of my class left. The two of us left. Both my roommates, they're dead. One was killed overseas in World War II and whatnot. So you lost a lot of good friends who paid the price, but they were part of the effort to prove that we could fly as well as anyone else, and it worked out that way. So we consider ourselves a respected group of the aviation family.
And I would assume when you look back at your almost 30 years of military service that is what you're probably most proud of.
That's right.
Sir, I thank you so much for your service to our country. I thank you so much for your time here with us today, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. As I say, I'm glad to be any place.
Our guest has been retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy, veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, 136 career combat missions, and a member of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles.